Hello and welcome to the Climate Trends podcast, where we discuss policies, trends, and innovations with people who are driving India's climate transition. I'm your host for today, Shreya Jay. India's ambition to expand the share of natural gas to 15% in its energy mix by 2030 is at a critical juncture. Rising LNG prices, supply disruptions, and evolving global gas dynamics have cast a shadow on this transition. So, in this episode of Climate Trends podcast, we unpack the growing debate around natural gas in India's energy landscape. Gas is often touted as a cleaner transitional fuel, but on the ground, the picture is far more complex. From volatile pricing to limited sectoral use and heavy import dependency, the role of gas in India's energy future raises critical questions. So, to help us make sense of it all, we are joined by Purva Jain, energy finance analyst at the Institute of Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. Her work closely examines the economics and infrastructure surrounding gas in India and implications for our transition narrative. Welcome to the Climate Trends podcast, Purva.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Shreya. I'm very happy to be here.
Let me just start with a broad overview. What is the share of gas in India's energy basket? How has it grown, say, in the last few decades? And also, if you can touch upon the key gas consumers in the country.
If you talk about the share in the energy mix, you know that there is a target to 15%. But what we have seen, and that target was sort of established in 2016, and it has remained somewhere between 6 to 7% in the last 10 years. It has not really grown massively. Of course, a lot happened in between in these 10 years. We all know that the pandemic happened and geopolitical conflicts, and we'll talk more about that as we progress during our conversation. But the share hasn't really grown that rapidly, and that 15% target for 2030 that has been set is not really, we're not very, very close to meeting that target at the moment. So that is about like the gas share. And when you talk about the sectors, it's an interesting mix. We do actually end up using gas in a couple of sectors. Fertilizer is one big consumer of gas in India. And then we also have city gas distribution, which includes your CNG, which is your compressed natural gas, which is the CNG vehicles and the transport use that we see. And then there is also, within the city gas distribution, you have the piped natural gas, which is also further split into like three different segments, which is your residential segment, which is the piped natural gas we get for cooking in our households. Then there is your PNG for commercial use, which is for the bigger commercial establishments, and then there is for industry. Apart from that, you also have gas consumption, a limited amount of gas consumption in the power sector in India. There is also an increasing use of gas by industries in the country. We have seen, industries, and more so from the miscellaneous industries, the smaller to medium industries, rather than refinery and petrochem. There has been a decline in the petrochem share and a marginal increase in the refinery use of gas. But these are like the broader sectors where you see gas consumption in India.
In recent times, we are witnessing that there is a growing push for gas infrastructure in India. Can you help us understand why gas has become so central in our policy and business directions or policy discussions? And what stands out to you in this surge of interest, especially in terms of the economic logic?
So if you would see, like, in the last 2 decades, if I can say, like 2004 is when we did our first LNG import. And in the last 2 decades, if I take from there, we have had like a big surge of domestic expectation of domestic gas output in from 2009 to 2014. We were hoping for a lot of producing a lot of domestic gas. And post that, when that sort of did not materialize for us, the global scenario also changed. The global supply sort of increased, where which kind of resulted in the prices for the global gas, or LNG, which is the liquefied natural gas which we import, sort of going down, and which sort of made this narrative for gas being an affordable cleaner fuel. So, of course, if you look at gas in comparison to a lot of other fuels that we use, the end use of gas is definitely much cleaner in terms of the carbon emissions. There is a different debate about methane emissions and the life cycle emissions of gas, and I can talk about it and touch upon it later. But so when you talk about just from a pure carbon emission sort of perspective, there is a environmental case for gas being cleaner in that sense. And then, in like I mentioned, with the domestic surge and with the LNG prices also sort of going down after that, there was also that affordability angle, and it made sense for gas to be uh, it made a case for gas being a transitional fuel in different countries' energy mixes as well, and not only India. But now things are changing. This decade is going to be a little different for gas consumption, because what has happened is that a lot of alternatives, cleaner, competitive in terms of prices, have sort of come up. So that sort of weakens the case for gas being the transition fuel. But the discussion sort of still comes from that legacy understanding of gas being a cleaner, affordable transition fuel. And that's why you see that there is so much focus on using gas in different countries. Coming to your second question, which you spoke about, you asked about, like the economic logic. Uh, I mean, from the work that we have done at IFA and from the research that we have done at IFA in the last few years, what we have seen, and especially in the last few years, what we have seen is that there is a limited economic logic or case, I would say, an argument for using gas in India, especially because one, our domestic gas is limited, like domestic gas production is limited. We did see a big surge around 2010, 2011. We had a peak of gas production, which completely dwindled because we know, like, the gas field could not produce the gas. But now there is again a discussion about increasing domestic gas production, but it is not at the same level at what we saw at, at its peak. And then if you have to sort of increase gas in our consumption, if you want to talk about like any of the sectors that I mentioned earlier, and if you want to talk about increasing gas in any of those sectors, then there is an there would be a need for an increased reliability on imported gas, which is liquefied natural gas, because we do not import anything through pipelines in India at the moment, and everything comes via LNG. And so there would be a need for that. LNG, unfortunately, has shown to be a very volatile fuel in terms of pricing, especially in the last few years. And that sort of, weakens the economic case. And then you also have the new technologies and the competitive alternatives, which sort of do not allow that demand growth to really come from, the gas sector per se, which sort of, in my opinion, weakens the economic case for gas in India.
Right, absolutely. And good you mentioned about LNG, because my next question to you is on the import dependency. India's gas economy continues to be heavily import dependent and hence is vulnerable to all the geopolitical shocks. So how does it impact, India's ambition to have 15% natural gas in its energy mix?
Yes, so I think that has been a challenge. When I mentioned to you earlier that we have not really increased that share, and there has been a slight increase in the last 1 year when the prices have eased out a little bit. And if you would see, the energy mix has gone up to like 7.2% in the last fiscal, from up from 6.5, 6.7 earlier. But so the pricing is becomes the determining factor. But like I also mentioned earlier, that the pricing has been volatile. You might see that, like, there are discussions about a supply glut coming for and for global gas, and the prices could really go down. But how reliable that price going down would be is something that we need to sort of look out for. And we have seen in the past that that sort of has not worked well for a lot of countries, and especially the South Asian countries, where the supplies were sort of diverted when the prices went really high, and there was arbitrage opportunities with other developed countries as well. So the that becomes a challenge with depending on an imported fuel. And we also, one of the arguments for using gas in India has also been that it sort of will lower our import bills. When we talk about, like, oil and gas, and we say that, okay, like, using gas as a transition fuel will help us lower our import bills. But that sort of also kind of gets negated in our case, because our production is not and it is increasing, but it's not increasing at that pace. And if we have to use, like, if some of the estimates say that at a 15% energy mix of gas, we need to probably import about 70% of gas for our use. So that sort of increases our import dependency. It exposes us to the vulnerabilities of whatever happens in the geopolitical domain, and the price impacts of something that is happening in other nations. So that is of course a challenge also when we talk about using LNG in India.
Right. Let me, dwell more into the gas geopolitics aspect. Uh, as you mentioned rightly, the last decade has been tumultuous for the sector because, the Russia-Ukraine war, Red Sea disruptions, global LNG shortages. What do you think are the lessons that India has drawn from these disruptions that our gas supply chain faced?
I think one thing that India changed in its, no, I think, let me step back. I think one thing that definitely happened is that our consumption of gas went down. So if you would see the charts, it's very clear. In 2022, you would see, like, when the LNG prices are higher, our gas consumption is lower compared to what it was earlier, when the prices, especially when the prices really went down in 2020, 22, sorry, during the pandemic, and when they have sort of eased out again in the last fiscal. And you would see, like, the prices impacting the consumption directly. So that in itself, and that is also as a worse impact for India in terms of industries. For example, there is enough evidence, and there is an IFA report that we have done on the gas use of industries, where we show that in that time when the prices went up and they had to switch away from gas, they actually switched to more dirtier fuels. So your naphtha and your other liquid fuels, which is something that as a country we're actively also trying to lower our dependence on. Those were the ones that sort of the consumption increased there. So that is one challenge when you talk about the geo impact of geopolitical disturbances. There's also a challenge of, like, the high fiscal subsidies that we faced during that time. We use a large chunk of imported gas, and it's increasing even more by the year, for producing fertilizers, which is sort of like a necessity fuel necessity consumption in India. And that's where we had, like, for consecutive 3 years, we had high subsidies. It touched like $30 billion, and it came down to $20 billion, which was just fertilizer subsidies, or the subsidies given to the fertilizer sector because of gas, or also because of the urea prices going up simultaneously. So that is another challenge that sort of became for India when it came to the geopolitical disturbances. The lessons, what I feel India is learning from that is, one, we are looking at, and because there was also a lot of dependence on the short-term contracts or the spot contracts that we say. So it was like an even split between the long-term contracts and the short-term contracts. So India is trying to build or get into more long-term contracts now. It's also sort of looking at securing supplies outside. So we are looking at investing in some gas projects outside, and you have seen that happen in recent times. So it's also trying to secure those supplies in that manner, which gives it a more assured availability of that supply. But that again would remain sort of limited versus the need that we're anticipating if you look at a 15% target. So that reliability concern will sort of continue to remain if we want to sort of push the share of gas in our energy mix.
And are there any ways to which we can safeguard us against all this, or do you think securing supply chain and hoping for the best on the geopolitical front is the way out? But I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I wish that would, just hoping for the best on the geopolitical front, then every country would just do that, if that strategy would work out. But unfortunately, no, that is not in our control. That is not in any country's control. And we have seen that things are becoming increasingly sort of like, tricky when it comes to the geopolitics now. There's so much ideas amongst all countries about their own energy security, which sort of also impacts what is happening in other countries. So I think the best way forward for India, and I think we are also moving in that direction, is to sort of enable more energy security in terms of, one, working towards higher renewable energy share. So that is already sort of happening for India. We are seeing that the deployment has increased, and even in the generation mix, you've seen that it's gone up in the last 10 years. It's gone up from like 3% to about 12% last fiscal, just wind and solar generation, if you would see. And that also sort of allows us to one use like indigenous, and I know there is a argument of supply chain amongst these as well. And but at least that sort of in the long term secures our once your infrastructure is developed, it sort of secures your long term energy needs. And also what India is doing with the hybrid tenders, what it's doing with your the battery storage, the work that we are doing on battery storage. So all those are the new tech, the new technology, the innovative business models. Those are the way forward to sort of ensure and secure the energy supply chains for India, and we are sort of moving in that direction at the moment.
What I really want to know is that would gas be a transition fuel for us, or or would it fall under or face a shorter than expected role in India's decarbonization strategy till the time we reach to a certain extent or amount of renewable energy?
So there is no doubt that India is a very price sensitive economy, and we all know that. And we have seen, like I said, that there is evidence of switching to any other alternative or more affordable alternatives when the gas prices have gone up. And we have seen that they have been very volatile, especially if you would see like during the last year, if you would see that when there was a lot of fluctuations in prices for all commodities, LNG, the spot energy prices showed the maximum volatility during that time, versus your gold, versus oil, and versus other commodities. So it has been the maximum volatile. Prices have still been high, like the LNG prices, even when they have eased out, they are around $12, $13 per MMBTU. And then you see that our domestic prices also were very high up till a very till few years ago, when we had a different gas pricing formula. Right now we have changed the gas pricing formula, and we also have a ceiling on that gas pricing formula, which allows us to have a gas price of, say, the domestic from older fields, the domestic gas price of about $6.75 per MMBTU, which was earlier $6.5 per MMBTU. So that gives it that space for gas, domestic gas especially. And you would see that for a lot of sectors, the increase is coming from domestic gas to increase. But that is only till the time that we have that ceiling. The moment it's deregulated, that challenge could kind of occur again. And then also because LNG, we still depend on LNG, and those prices continue to be volatile. So the price sensitivity of the economy and the consumers sort of impact the demand growth of fuel. And that has been a little lackluster for gas. We have not seen that, like, even in price, even in times of like prices really dipping down from very high prices, that inertia sort of still remains, and you don't see a sudden swing of like the demand going up, and it sort of takes a little bit of time to rise up again. So that sort of, and if the end consumer or the end demand sort of remains limited, you will not see a fuel increasing in the overall energy mix. So that would be in my understanding of how gas, the role of gas has to evolve in the country, at least in the medium to short term.
Got it. I would love to discuss on the consumption front, but before that, just very quickly, are there any lessons from other countries, or are there any global models that India can adapt, especially on avoiding the long-term gas lock-ins and some of the issues that you were discussing earlier?
I mean, it is volatile right now. The global situation is also volatile. It's changing. You see commitments made from no new gas infrastructure to sort of going back on that as well. We have seen what Japan has done. Like Japan spoke about in G7 a commitment about like no new gas, not really a no new gas infrastructure, but around the gas, limiting gas consumption. But we have seen that it has grown. It is importing from Australia, and it's also using that opportunity to sort of trade with other countries with that gas. So I think gas, and especially right now in the last few months, we have seen a different narrative happen on gas consumption and gas use, and again, like the discussion on gas as a transition fuel. So that is happening in different countries right now. Europe is also again talking about it is a mixed message from them as well. There are instances of they are not actively saying that we're not going to increase consumption, but you see a lot of increased deployment of renewable energy in Europe as well. So I think it is about the country's own assessment of what is right for them. And for India, because we do not have a lot of our own gas, and it does not appear that we will be producing a lot. There is an increase in production, but it does not appear that it's going to massively increase in at least the short term. And when you talk about transition fuel, and even like other reports also, when they talk about transition fuel, it's a 10 to 15 years window. So when we talk about that, then will that really be, even if we are able to produce gas after say 7 or 8 years, how much of that will be useful for us is something that we need to see here. And we don't want to be locking in infrastructure and investments when we also have, like as a country, we're also investing a lot in other newer cleaner technologies. So it's about the optimal utilization of that investment and those resources as well when we talk about locking investing in gas.
India has several LNG terminals under construction. What do you think of this development? How much will it help in securing our supply chain and increase usage inside the country, and help us align with our own targets of decarbonization and transition?
Yeah, I think interesting question and a very relevant question as well, because you're right. There are a lot of under construction terminals, and I like to make 2 points on that. So one is on the utilization. So what has happened is that if you would see the utilization rates for these terminals, it's been less than 50% for six of the operating terminals which were operating in the last fiscal. The Chara terminal only came online in 2025, in January 2025. So if you exclude that from the conversation, of the remaining seven terminals, six were under 50% of utilization. So that is indicative of what sort of demand or what sort of utilization, how well utilized the existing infrastructure is. Now, that brings us to the second point of this conversation, which is the mandate or the regulation that PNGRB has come up with. Only like I think last month, which was, and PNGRB is the Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board, and they have mandated, like they've sort of doing a review of all the under construction terminals and the existing terminals, and this regulation is applicable to all terminals from 2007. And what they want, it's like a sweeping framework where they want to sort of mandate registrations, public disclosure of terminal charges, make sure like that the pre-investment submissions are done before setting up or operating any LNG terminals in India, because of the existing inefficiencies that have led to the poor utilization of the terminals. So that is another indicator of what is happening when it comes to the infrastructure use, especially the LNG import infrastructure use in the country.
Now, let me shift the gear towards the gas consumption sectors. Let's start with transport. India's use of gas in transport is very different from the global norm. What does it tell us about our energy priorities, and do you see a change anytime soon in the future?
Yes, you're right. Like it is, it's an interesting, unique, I would say, sort of emphasis on transport in India. If you would see the other countries, like for example, the USA and the Europe, not countries, but if you would see USA and Europe, what we see there is the maximum use is in say residential or in power. And here in India, we have multiple sectors, and transport is being also it's like a priority sector as well when it comes to gas allocation. So it's been a priority sector for domestic gas allocation. And we're also seeing an increasing use or of LNG in the city gas distribution sector, which I was explaining to you earlier. So, and within the city gas distribution, the maximum growth of that sector is coming from CNG, which implies that it's coming from the use of gas in transport. So we have seen that increase happening in the transport sector. It's again been like that is also price sensitive. So you see that in times of like lower prices, you would see higher vehicle sales and you would see higher consumption. And in times of like higher prices, when the CGD companies increase the prices, then you would see lower sales and lower consumption of gas in the transport sector. So that is happening. And another aspect of transport is the LNG trucks that we're talking about. There has been a regulation by the government about for replacing about one third of the diesel trucks with LNG trucks by 2030. And of course, the what is happening in that right now is it's slow because the infrastructure challenges also remain in that. Now, when we talk about LNG, using LNG as in the trucks, then we also have to look for liquefaction capacities for India. We have to look for the cryogenic tankers. We have to look for the trucks manufacturer. China is a country that has, increased its use of LNG trucks, but it is very clear that it's using it as a transition fuel. It started doing that in 2015, and it aims to sort of eliminate a lot of that by 2030 and shift gears to electric based transportation. So there is an increase in transportation use of CNG and LNG, but the challenge in that as well is also of the competitiveness with other fuels. And when I say other fuels, is also EV now, like the electric vehicles. So you're seeing, like, if you would see the data, like the increase or the jump in the CNG vehicles versus EV vehicles from 2017 to 2024, you would see that there is a massive jump in EV vehicles, and especially like two wheelers and three wheelers, the cargo equipments. But that same increase is not seen by the CNG vehicles, especially when they have been around, say, for longer. Then also you don't see that increase. Again, another way to sort of assess the situation is by infrastructure use. So if you would see like how our infrastructure, the CNG infrastructure, has increased rapidly in the last 4 5 years, and how that is not resulting in the demand growth, equal demand growth. So your CNG infrastructure is increasing, but the consumption of CNG by the CGD sector is not increasing at that same pace. So that also sort of indicates about that could probably lead to a stranded asset risk for the CNG or the CNG stations or the CNG infrastructure that is coming up in the transport sector.
I've also wanted to understand what role is electric mobility and its expansion in the country impacting gas infrastructure and gas usage growth in the country. Has it reached to a level where it's kind of challenging gas economy in the country?
I mean, it would be difficult to just directly answer that question and say yes, it's happening, or no, it's not happening. But we are seeing the trends. We are seeing that there is an increment in, the electric mobility that is happening, and you're seeing, what we saw, what Delhi has stated, for example. It has said that it will not be registering any new gas-based vehicles after 2025. It's also sort of mandated for an increased use of electric vehicles and the vehicles that are coming in. So those sort of policy directions that we're looking at, and that it starts to sort of overflow and happen in other states as well. We do keep seeing like states coming up with their own electric mobility plans, or the electric vehicles plan as well, on a constant basis, and updating them as and when needed. So we are seeing that policy direction and that policy push for e-mobility. I would not say that right now. I'm at least not in a position to comment if that has reached that stage where it could completely push out CNG. But at least we are seeing, and if you look at the numbers, if you see, if just the pure CNG only vehicles, the total, which includes your two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, and even your goods vehicle, in 2017-18 they were around 27,000, which increased to about 5 lakhs, I would say, in 24-25. But versus the pure EV, and I'm not even including the hybrid vehicles in this, that would, the pure EV ones increased from, say, 96,000 to about 19 lakhs in the same time frame. So that increment that you're seeing is happening massively in the EV space for sure, the e-mobility space, and the policy push also is sort of supporting the same thing. Of course, you would say that there is a policy push for LNG trucks as well, but and which would obviously result in some increment. At some point, but the like I mentioned, the infrastructure challenge for that is massive, because you need like large amounts of investments to just be. And then we do not have we have a few companies operating in providing those trucks, but right now it's not like a massive amount of players, and that EV is able to solve that problem. You see a massive amount of players coming in the EV space. The market maturity of EV is definitely slightly higher than, or I would say reasonably higher than, your LNG trucks for sure. If I like to compare it with the entire CNG segment, then we need to sort of, I would need to do a little bit more analysis on that. But yeah, at least when it comes to trucks, you have a higher market maturity for EV, and especially the regional trucks. Long haul is something that we need to still evaluate. What is, how we can use electric trucks in the long haul space, but for the regional and the short to medium routes, of course, EV makes a lot more economic sense as well.
Share of gas in power generation in the country has remained stagnant. It plays a role of a balancing agent, but still there has not been any growth in that segment. Can you shed a light on the reasons why is that?
Yes, I think what has happened is that the gas share has actually gone down. So if you would see from, say, when it peaked in fiscal year 2010, then it was around 13%. It's actually gone down to 2% in the last fiscal. It's been around 2%, 1% in the last few years. The reason for that is the competitiveness of gas-based generation versus other generations. I'll just step back and talk about the time when it was peaking. It was essentially because we had the expectation of huge domestic gas being produced in the country. The power plants came up, it was more affordable. We did not have a lot of other resources also at that time. So two things happened simultaneously. One, your gas domestic gas production dwindled, and at the same time your solar production, like the solar based capacity, sort of started coming up. So, and when you had to use LNG for gas versus the solar prices going down, and your coal price, of course, your coal being a dominant contributor to the generation, the competitiveness of gas based capacity or the gas based generation sort of, went away, and that it could not really play a massive role in the power generation in the country. When you talk about the balancing role, we have seen that in the last year and the year before that, we had massive heat waves, we had unprecedented peak demand requirements, and we saw the government mandating all the existing gas based capacity to sort of be available and be online and be to be able to produce gas if required. Tenders were floated for with minimum guarantees for providing that gas. A lot of that was not utilized. The gas based generation, if you would see, would in last year, like the PLF utilization of the gas plants, if you would see in the last year, for the entire year it was only 14%, and if you would see in the winter months from November to March, it actually went down to 10%. So the utilization of the plants is not happening. You are looking at it for that balancing role, but that's also not really serving that purpose, because right now we also have more solar plus hybrid or wind solar hybrid, your battery technology come up, and we are seeing standalone BES projects come up. We are seeing the FDRE tenders. So all this is also sort of contributing to utilization of your renewable energies for longer hours than it can be actually available. So there is also one aspect of that, and these prices are also more competitive. So if you would look at the FDRE prices, it's actually much lower than the gas prices that can come up with your actual domestic or the LNG gas prices that are operational. LNG prices, of course, are absolutely not competitive when it comes to your 2 to 3 rupees of coal and solar and all those other fuels, and even the FDRE tenders, which are between and 4 to 5 rupees, and the lowest was achieved recently. So when all that is happening, then the competitiveness of gas-based generation is not there for the country at all. What we have seen, in fact, that there were a lot of inoperational plants, and only in April 2025 now the government has retired. So we had about 25 gigawatts of gas capacity. About 12 to 12.5 gigawatts of that had been sort of stranded or inoperational for a while. The government has retired about 5 gigawatts of that in April 2025. So now our total gas capacity has actually come down to roughly about 20 gigawatts. Um, yeah.
As a quick cooking fuel, gas has been immense success in the country thanks to government policy and aggressive public outreach. How would you rate that success first? And do you think there's still some challenges? If they are, can you address that with the potential solutions as well?
Yeah. So, yes. So, PNG domestic, which we say is a cooking fuel, and that is one aspect of your entire city gas distribution. There are challenges. We have not seen, of course, there has been an increment, but that has not been the way probably it's targeted. So, we have about 15 million connections, PNG connections at the moment in the country. And that's like the last fiscal year data. So, up till March 2025, I'm talking about, and then the target is for 120 million till 2032. So we're really short of the target when it comes to the PNG connections. Then if you see the connections are increasing, of course every year the connections are adding up, but in your total utilization or the total consumption of gas in the CGD segment, it still continues to be 8%. So the PNG domestic segment continues to use 8% of the total city gas distribution gas allocation. Of course, that allocation is also increasing slightly, but it still is not, again, the consumption is not increasing at the same pace as it is, as the infrastructure is. Secondly, the infrastructure also remains short of the target that we are looking at for 2032. So it remains massively short of that target. Challenge is the pricing again. We have seen that it's been volatile. The prices have increased a lot in the last few years, from when like PNG was another, like affordable clean fuel for your houses. That was the idea of PNG, but that affordability aspect has changed quite a lot in the last few years. And because with the prices increasing and the sector allows the utilities to pass that price, the price increases to the consumers. So when that is happening, and that has resulted in a lower uptake of PNG as a fuel. So that the pricing challenge, and when you try to compare it with electricity, that it probably would be cheaper to use electricity, but we don't have the we have not really pushed electric based cooking in the country at the moment. So the idea the government for PNG was that PNG can be used in urban areas with it freeing up LPG resources in the rural areas. That really has not really happening at the moment, because you still continue to see almost 40% of the population depending on solid fuels for their cooking needs at the moment. And that's where we probably need to evaluate the strategy, and maybe sort of also bring in electric based cooking as one of the key measures. And the government has introduced schemes like the Go Electric scheme for that, but it still needs a little bit more push in that direction.
Right, absolutely. So, at a broader level, what are some of the more efficient ways through which the country can plan for its energy access and transition policies without, over indexing or over relying on gas?
I think uh, I think what we're doing right now to a lot of extent is what continues to be done. Probably we just need to also sort of start evaluating the investments that we are making in the gas sector, because then you tend to lock in those investments for a longer time frame. So when we talk about any new and like the regulation that PNGRB has come up with, for example, sort of evaluates the use of that investment for more terminals and where the demand is going to come from and how that's going to be utilized. So I think one is that, and then obviously then wisely utilizing our available resources for moving to or leapfrogging gas if possible in at least areas or sectors where you have cheaper, more competitive, more affordable, cleaner technologies available. So that would be it'll be more like a long-term strategy than instead of being a short to medium-term strategy, because then that also will help you align with your decarbonization goals. So like for example in the trucks, there is a India has commitment for zero emission trucking by 2050. So if you have that and gas based trucks do not fall under that zero emission trucking. So if you have that policy in place already, then to move along with that, investments probably in the regional trucks and the MDHTs is what would be needed for the trucking sector as well. So I think it needs to be evaluated that where the necessity of gas is there, that investments need to be made, and where we can really leapfrog that technology to sort of go into more cleaner or more advanced technologies. So you're talking about green hydrogen, you're talking about energy storage, and there is a lot that is happening within the country and globally, and the prices are being increasingly competitive. So that needs to be evaluated.
During the course of our discussion, you mentioned several technologies which can be an alternative or a supplement to the natural gas economy in the country. To conclude, can you round up some of the emerging and cleaner technologies which would, or potential solutions which would help India leapfrog gas?
Yeah, I think it would not just be technologies, but like a gamut of solutions that we need to look at. And so for example, fertilizers. So fertilizer sector uses a large amount of gas in the country, but the government is looking at solutions like organic fertilizers. So it's the biogas slurry, and we are talking about increased use of biogas as well in the country. So the biogas slurry can be like the organic fertilizer. There's discussion on nano urea. So there are discussions, green ammonia, increased utilization of green ammonia. So that is happening, say, for example, in the fertilizer sector. Then you look at the power sector, there's already, we know that it's limited use, and the limited use, like you mentioned correctly, for the balancing and the flexibility and the availability for quick ramp up and ramp down, that is also already happening with, your FDRE tenders, which are priced under 5 rupees at the moment. And that's happening with your battery storage that is coming up. And we're looking at like great strides happening in the battery storage sector as well. So all that can help you sort of balance out the use of gas in the power sector. In any way, it's so limited at the moment. Then you have your transport sector. We spoke about like how the electric vehicles and e-mobility is giving out like a big challenge to all the other fuels when it comes to the transport sector, and how we can sort of invest and push that a little bit more. And there is of course the electricity argument as well of it being coal dependent, but we are looking at high and large deployments of renewable energy in the country. And we are seeing like according to the Central Electricity Authority's optimal generation mix, we'll see about 30% of electricity come from solar and wind by 2030. So those are the solutions when it comes to, say, transport. Or when we talk about cooking, then or we have not seen that sort of uptake when it comes to of course there is an incremental use, but there would be benefits of using, say, electricity based cooking, or even like solar based cooking off grid. There are good off grid measures that can be utilized in rural areas where you still have limited use of clean fuels, including both LPG and BNG. So those can be the solutions in when it comes to your cooking. So across sectors there are a lot of solutions which are probably are either a mix of technology or innovative business models. And like for cooking also, there's a pay and go business model which has been very popular in other countries. So those sort of it'll need a mix of these technologies and business models, and that would not only with the objective of sort of leapfrogging gas, but also sort of moving towards the decarbonized economy that we keep talking about, and the targets that we have set. So just to meet those as well, these are the solutions that would be needed.
This was great. Thank you so much. And the whole discussion was very comprehensive. You covered all facets of the gas economy and the future that beholds for India's decarbonization journey. Thank you so much for talking with Climate Trends. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Shreya, for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.